G'day, Anthony.
How's it going, dude?
How are you?
I'm all right. I dropped my pick already. I've been doing that a lot lately.
Me too,
and
actually.
And it's worse when you use these picks because they're probably not the most expensive guitar pick on the market, but I would say close.
What pick is it?
It's a blue chip
Let's see it.
CT55. These
Very specific.
they're mandolin picks classically. They were the
Okay.
signature pick for Chris Thiele, the mandolin player, and they cost somewhere around $40 a pick.
Oh gosh.
And he doesn't even use them anymore. He's moved on. He's got a signature pick with Diodario. I have one of theirs. It's one of these Dunlop rather. This one is at least a prime tone, same thickness, kind of aimed at the same thing. And as I find as I get older, I'm less and less particular about certain things with tone. But one thing I can always tell is the difference in tone between these two picks, and I can tell from just dropping them on a table.
Wow.
Like they sound different when you drop them on a table. So typically when I tour, I carry like a couple of these, which is already like $80 of This is like, it shouldn't be telling people that I have all this money because I don't. But and then I usually carry one or two of these. And then the worst part is like in the rare occasion I play a gig where somebody like a head comes up at the end of the night and is like, "Could I get a pick, brother?" I can't give them these. I'll go broke. So I have to carry another one that's cheap, and sometimes it'll even just be that, just to say, "Here you go, man." But yeah, I just picked up two more of these from Carter Vintage, and something in me dies a little bit every time I buy a blue chip. But it's the fault of a bluegrass guitar player named Chris Eldridge he's in the band Punch Brothers with Chris Thiele, and many years ago I took one lesson from him because I was joining a band where they had sort of bluegrass leanings, but there's drums, and it was kind of a rock and roll band, but the fiddler was like a great bluegrass old-time fiddle player, and and so Chris was like showing me the ropes around some bluegrass stuff, and then he said, "Have you ever tried one of these?" And that was, 13 years ago, and my life has been ruined ever since because I can't play with anything else. I play with it's a 1.4 millimeter pick. It's like a chunk of wood, but it's the only thing that I can play with on acoustic and electric.
What band was that?
That was a band called New Country Rehab, Canadian band, led by a guy named John Showman, who started the band with a couple great musicians in the Toronto area, Roman Tomei and Champagne James Robertson, amazing telly player up there, and Ben Whiteley, and they started the band by just taking old Hank Williams songs and throwing away the music, just rewriting the music completely. And John was like he's like a champion fiddle player who also loves like Slayer. So it was a very strange band, and I ended up joining them the year I graduated from college. I joined them for about 6 months and did like a whole album release tour with them, which was fun. It was a fun experience. It was like sort of my first time really. I toured with some songwriters backing them up, but it was my first time touring in like a band, and they were like always joking around, like pretty dark humor, kind of ate like trash. Like it was like, I'd never been to White Castle before. It was like that kind of thing. And they were also all basically married, and I was not. I was like, they were all older than me. I was like 22 years old. This is like most of my career I've played with people much older. And they were fascinated by just anyone who was single. And I'd be on the road, and Tinder had just become a thing. And so once in a while, if we were stopping in a place, I'd be like, "Oh, maybe I can meet someone nice." And I would like go on Tinder, and they were fascinated by Tinder. This is like early iPhone days. But anyway, New Country Rehab. I thought for a second, like maybe I'll move to Toronto. This seems cool, but I fall in love with places like that kind of easily.
So, but you did move to Toronto. You finished. Where did you go to college, and what did you study?
I went to college at Columbia University in the city of New York,
Okay.
I studied there. I ended up graduating with a degree in ancient Greek and Roman history. Don't ask me much about it because for some reason a lot of it has left my brain, and which is not what my parents want to hear. By the time I was in college, I had already been touring and playing out for years. I started doing this, playing songs and singing out in public and making records when I was like 13 years old. So I'd already been playing out, and so the concept of music school was kind of challenging for me because I was like not a big theory person, still am not, and got into Berkeley, your spot, and and a couple others, and got into NYU for their music tech program and engineering, and sat in on one class where they started talking about circuits, and I was bored to tears, and I never thought that someday I would end up being an engineer and owning a recording studio. But then Berkeley was cool, but by the time I got through the audition process and everything, I went to a party one night, and it was all these really well-meaning kids there, but it's a lot of people talking about and doing the same thing. If you go to a music school, I'm sure it can be similar if you're all going to med school or something. And so I was at a party where all these kids, the vibe was like, oh my God, you're so good, we're all so good, and playing Bob Marley songs, like a bunch of white people sitting in a circle playing Bob Marley, and I was like, this is awesome, but I need someone to talk about anything else. And so I ended up going to Columbia. I got in, much to the chagrin of a couple girls in my class in my hometown who had slightly better grades than I. They said, you only got into Columbia because you were in the New York Times. And I said, well,
When were you in the New York Times?
when I was 17.
What for?
I was a folk music, kid in Westchester County. I was a bit of an anomaly, I played a bunch of gigs around the Hudson Valley, and, had the rack harmonica, kind of started by doing Dylan tunes in the band and stuff,
Cool.
and then started writing my own stuff. And sooner or later, I was able to play some festivals and got some cool opening gigs. I opened for Loretta Lynn when I was a kid, and all these different people. And then, the Times wrote a profile on me when I was 17. It was like Westchester artist on the rise, And I was just, traveling around the state playing coffee shops with my, little foldable PA system, and I grew my sideburns out long because I thought that was cool. And so yeah, man. I mean, it was trippy. College was just a way for me to I had a songwriting mentor who said, he called me Grasshopper. He said, Grasshopper, you've spent years putting stuff out there. It's time for you to put some stuff back in. So I went to liberal arts college and got a degree, but the whole time was going out and playing music as often as I could, weeknights in the city, weekends out of state and stuff, and made it through. But yeah, it sort of seems like a distant memory now, any sort of formal education.
But you didn't stay in New York. You moved way down south. Where did you end up?
I ended up in Austin, Texas. I found myself, because of that time when I was coming up playing music, I ended up attending a festival when I was 16 called the Kerrville Folk Festival, which is out. I recommend it to anybody who's a lover of songwriter music. It's a really special place. It's on a ranch out in the hill country, a couple hours outside of Austin. And I went down there to play this songwriting competition called the New Folk Competition. And it was this festival's been going for over 50 years. And some really well-known songwriters have come through and played that. And I won because music is a competition. And at 16, I was the youngest winner ever. My friend Christopher makes fun of me still. Did you tell them you're the youngest winner? But because of that festival, I met all of these amazing musicians from Austin. And so all through the rest of high school and college, I just had all these buds in Austin and would travel down there for things like South by Southwest, and I just fell in love with the city. And especially when I was kind of going through my I'm depressed time in college, anytime I went to Austin, I just felt better. So I ended up right out of college. I did the Canadian gig for a while, and then I just beelined to Austin, Texas, and I ended up living there for about 3 years, so not super long, but long enough to really become a part of that scene. And I had my regular gigs. When I was off the road, I worked at a guitar shop called South Austin Music, which has been there for 35 years or something. Shout out to Bill Welker, my old boss. Still gives me relationship advice, sometimes unsolicited. But yeah, it was a really special time. It's still in a lot of ways my feels like my spiritual home, you know, just because I have, I mean, the Northeast, you know, the Northeast in me will never die, and I feel it more and more these days. But sometimes I really, like, I've lived in the South for basically my entire adult life, between Austin and now Nashville. And what I learned in Austin, because Austin obviously is where South by Southwest happens, but it's not really an industry town, you know. I mean, South by Southwest started as something to like promote local artists and bands. Like, you got a showcase by like bringing your tape to like the Austin Chronicles office, you know. And so Austin, to me, it's a bit of a bubble, which feels really good, and it's also challenging in terms of like touring. You know, it takes a day to get out of Texas if you're touring by van, but you know, I learned from some of the greatest songwriters and guitar players, drummers, what have you, I've ever met, and that includes all my time here in Nashville. Some of them are still right there in Austin, Texas, because there's something about, people like to say there's something in the water there. There's just something about the way people mean it there. And really feels like they're doing it for the love of it, maybe because of the fact that it's a slightly more insular scene as opposed to everybody kind of like having like hungry eyes for like what could happen for their careers. It's like there are people who just like play in Austin, Texas, like week in and week out. And that's something that I was lucky enough to get to do in between touring and whatever else I was doing. Still just that's like where I feel like I found my sound, especially as an electric guitar player, was like from playing a lot of gigs in Austin.
Right.
Yeah.
So, was it Nashville after Austin?
Yeah. I moved to Nashville in the summer of 2016. I was dating someone very briefly.
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
Happy 10 years.
This month. Yeah.
Oh,
thank
wow.
You. Yeah,
cool.
It's a 10-year town. So this is what you can. COVID sometimes knocks like 2 or 3 off of that, but yeah, I was dating a fantastic musician. Very short-lived relationship, but it got me to Nashville. I'd always had people tell me that I should be in Nashville. I would love it. You know, I had a lot of friends here. I'd really only ever come here a few times, but I you know, got in my car and luckily had a friend with a room in her house, and I paid $500 a month to live in East Nashville for the first couple of years I was here, and just got to it. Just started playing. You know, again, I've always loved residencies, so started playing locally at places like the 5 Spot and D's, and was lucky enough to start getting some session work. I was doing a lot of live work, touring. At the time, playing with people like Sarah Jarosz and soon like Molly Tuttle and Yola and Joy Williams from the Civil Wars, you know, all through those first few years of living in town, and just fell in with a lot of like bluegrass players. Like there are a lot of bluegrass musicians here who are kind of like secretly jazz musicians and classical musicians, like sort of what they call the new acoustic movement of music here. And there's, you know, I just I don't know. And there were, as I said, so many singer-songwriters who I already met through just the scene and traveling all those years. So it felt like a natural fit. I don't know if like it looks exactly like I thought it would, you know, which I know you talk about that a lot on your channel. It's sort of been a fascinating ride, and I've had to wear a lot of different hats. But it's still, I tell people like, you got to definitely visit, and you know, there is definitely nowhere else like it. I don't believe there's a music city like this. I don't really think LA and Nashville can be compared very accurately. I definitely don't think New York, and even Austin. Like there's a very unique blend of things happening here musically. Some of them are incredibly inspiring, and some of them are incredibly frustrating. But it's if you want to be in the thick of it as a songwriter, and perhaps as a side musician, like there's really not a city that is so hyper focused on music in a way that Nashville is. So you know, it's for that reason I've stayed. You know.
Speaking of good musicians, Molly Tuttle.
Yeah,
that's a pretty. She's a heavy picker, man. She
truly is.
Like that's. How do you land in a position like that as someone who, I mean, we've never discussed this, and we know each other well enough, you know. You come from less of a perhaps picking and more of a songwriting background, and you've landed yourself presumably in a guitar role, and that's a heavy picking. That's like monster picking territory. How do you end up there? How was that?
It
as
was
well.
fun. It was fun. Molly is amazing. She's really, you know, and even in the year, this was back in, I met Molly when I moved to Nashville, and luckily, I forget how we were linked up, but we ended up writing a little bit together and playing a couple gigs together and singing. You know, we like learned a cover song or two, and just this is, you know, again, I formed, even as a producer now, a lot of the people I've produced, I form relationships with them first as kind of like fellow artists and songwriters, you know, which I think, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think can help sort of further develop a trust and understanding, because I don't really come to any of the, like, I do this, like the lead guitar thing for me was a total accident. Like I never set out to be a lead guitar player in anyone's band. It was never a career goal of mine. I was an artist, I still am an artist, who just liked to sit in at festivals like Kerrville Folk Festival and Falcon Ridge Folk Festival in upstate New York. Like I just loved sitting around the fire or whatever we had going, and the Lantern, if it was a no burn festival or something, and just like sitting in on people's tunes. And I fell in love with the playing of people like, you know, Dave Rawlings and whatever. And it's like, oh, if I capo it up here and play it in a different form, you know, it sounds different. It's a cool layer, you know. But I was never like trying to get into these bands. It just sort of kept snowballing, and we could talk another time. We have more time about the sort of pros and cons of that as an artist, you know, because it has also diverted from, you know, certain attentions and energies for my own music. But
I think that would be an important conversation, by the way.
Yeah,
not to interrupt. Sorry.
Oh, it is. No, it is. I mean,
should have that.
It is. With Molly specifically, though, we were just buddies, and I'd already shown, I think, what I can do in the context of playing, because I had been playing with artists like Aoife O'Donovan, who used to have a band called Crooked Still and makes a ton of amazing solo music, and Sarah Jarosz, both artists who sort of come more from the like bluegrass and contemporary, whatever you want to call it, like acoustic music scene, who were doing more of a singer-songwriter thing now. So Molly, before the record I toured with her, she was really playing with bluegrass combos, and even since she's kind of gone back and forth. But the record that she was promoting back then is called When You're Ready, and that record was kind of more, I likened it to like her sort of 90s like contemporary singer-songwriter album, you know, like an Amy Mann or something. Like it just you know, it was her first time touring with like drums. She had like a drummer, you know, really like a rhythm section, you know, and Molly Tuttle does not need a lead guitar player. She just doesn't need a lead guitar player. She is the lead guitar player in anything that she does. But the way that the record was, there were some textural things that needed to be taken care of. And I actually got a call for that gig really last minute. I think they had somebody else in mind that didn't work out. And so I was called super last minute and had to learn this record really quickly. And the interesting thing about that tour was they also needed me to play keys, which I have gotten much more proficient at in the studio here, but I've always kind of been more ham-fisted with keys as a songwriter. And they needed someone to play like, you know, some Nord, some just classic Nord piano and whirly on some songs. Luckily, I think all the piano on her record was played by a guitar player. I can't remember if it was Chris Donegan or somebody. So it was within my realm. But anyway, so I got to do that gig for, you know, the better part of a year. I was kind of bouncing between that and playing with this singer Yola. And it was interesting. It's, you know, with somebody like Molly, you're really trying to stay out of the way. And there was also a lead fiddle player too. So my role in that was probably the most utility role I've ever had. In a lot of the bands I've toured with, artists I've toured with, my job is to typically make a lot more sound. I'm the only lead instrument. When I toured with Aoife, it was just Aoife, me, and a drummer. We didn't even have a bass player. So I was playing like octave stuff. I didn't even have a baritone back then. I was, you know, so like usually, or as a duo with someone like I'm touring right now with Amy Helm, Levon Helm's daughter, who's incredible. And we're about to do a duo tour where I am, you know, in some cases she'll just sing and I'll be covering all the ground, you know. So I've had a lot of roles like that, which makes it kind of an interesting and I think fun challenge in playing with someone like Molly, where it was like, actually, I kind of need to step back a little bit.
Right.
So that's always been a fun challenge for me, and that's something I got to do with Molly.
That's also why I'm here. We put together this little mini board.
That's right.
Has everything you need and everything you don't.
Yeah.
Someday we'll do a video about I still remember the first time I visited your old studio, and I
Yeah.
freaked out, and I was so, you remember, I was like
Yeah.
a child on.
Well, and you're the first person to have a camera in here in the
Oh,
new
really?
one. Yeah, I'm still setting it up.
Someday we'll do we'll have to do like a long
That
video
would be
about
fun. I would love that. I love that stuff. Yeah.
Oh,
This,
yeah.
I just moved into this place. My fiance.
so
and I.
much cool rack gear.
Yeah,
Oh, so fun.
But it's funny. I've gone so hard in the paint now for years. I went now with the studio stuff in terms of outboard equipment and even these synthesizers and whatever microphones. You know, I've gone so hard in the paint with this stuff like I used to with guitars and amps and pedals for many years. Especially when I lived in Austin, I was swapping out pedals and I was just like horse trading constantly. And it's funny as time has gone on. And this isn't the most fun to hear on like a channel that addresses a lot of guitar gear, but like I have found myself not necessarily caring less, but I've kind of found a sound that I love, and I tend to find these, whether it's a guitar company like Collings Guitars for me, or our friend Chris Benson with his amps and his pedals. Like the second I find a piece of equipment where I don't have to think about it anymore and I'm not constantly tweaking it, that's what I glom onto now. With this stuff, I've gone hard because I've had to it's newer to me, and I've had to kind of figure out what I like and what I don't like, and that's what we do with amps and pedals and all that. But like the second I started playing Chris's pedals and then his amps, suddenly I'm like, well, overdrive's taken care of. Well, amps are taken care of. The second I started playing Collings guitars, I was like, well, this is like all the cool vintage stuff that I love, but it just works. It's not junky. Because I controversially find a lot of vintage guitars to be very junky. If they've been taken care of by a great tech, it's a different story. I have a beautiful Gibson J50, 1950 J50 back there that my tech just went through, and it's sounding gorgeous. But like the Collings stuff functions. Like I play a lot live, and I need stuff to like work, and I have, you know, I want my hands to feel good and comfortable. So like, but what's funny about something like this is like I'm so far out of the game of the modelers and the MIDI switching and all this stuff. It's not my thing. But that's why I called you, because I know how quick you are with this stuff, and because we were talking off camera a second ago about how you you know, from my perspective, I'm like, well, you deal in a world where you have to be, I know it's under a lot of the Broadway gigs are under the country umbrella or whatever, but like you have to be a lot more tonally versatile than I do. And so that's why I admire your skill with this stuff. Like I just watched you set up my whole rig here, and like people used to come to me to do this kind of stuff, and now I'm like, Cameron, can you please come over? Because this is just not my world anymore. And it's, yeah, but you know, the more that time goes on and the more I travel, I'm like, gosh, I don't want to lug this giant. I don't have typically a roadie. I've only done 1 or 2 bus tours. There's no cartage to my studio gig. It's like, it's me in my car, you know? Right. So I don't want to lug heavy stuff anymore. I play the lightest guitar I could find. Is a fully hollow Collings i30 that just feels good and doesn't, you know, and, but you convinced me that I should be taking this preamp Mark II out on the road by Benson and Chase Bliss Audio, because, you know, I had just my Benson preamp out, and you were like, is there a reason you're not using this thing? Stuff like this used to scare me. Just the fact,
really?
the whole selling point of it, that it switches and it does all this stuff. And even this, we have it set up almost as dumb as it possibly could be. You set me up with my rhythm tone, which I don't want to be too loud with, and then you press this button, and it's a lead tone. And that's it. That's all we have set up. And you know what? That means the world to me. I love that. I love that I can have 2 sounds on it and it's done. And I love that this thing, I can, you know, I had the bigger HX thing. This is all, again, it's silly because songwriter friends of mine for many years, Anthony, I need a delay pedal. What should I get? You know, I used to be that guy. And now I'm finding myself coming back around where I'm like, I need a guy. I need someone who knows.
Know, the funniest thing about all of it is even if I'm using the most complex thing, I'm finding the most complex way to do the simplest things. And I still use the same. I talk about it all the time. I found the Zen Drive through my teacher when I was 15. Mm-hmm. I've used, that's my main pedal. It will never change. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I find most guys I know, we go back to what we know.
Yes.
We're just, it's almost like you're trying every way to not use what you know, but you're getting the same result anyway. You're getting the same sound. Totally. You're just using a different brand.
That's, I mean, that's like, we were talking a second ago about the new time, that the Strymon has a new timeline out. I've been using the same will be generous and say 6 sounds on my timeline, and it's probably really 4 since 2014. And I'm scared to buy the new one because I'm like, I'm sure it sounds better, but I'm like, can I get my weird tremolo delay sound in there? I just, I think I have a lot of respect for the years that we spend and the energy we spend like tweaking all this stuff and finding this stuff. But at a certain point, the sooner that stuff can get out of the way, I think is like really helpful. And then we find the next thing that we nerd out over and are inspired by. If we've talked about vintage samplers, we've talked about synthesizers and drum machines and the 612. Yeah, I stole that from my friend Aaron Steele. The idea to get one of those. But yeah, like all this stuff is amazing, and it's and it's a huge part of what I do is how I sort of like craft these sounds. But like, I think being a singer-songwriter at heart, where like there were many years where all I had was a Washburn cutaway acoustic guitar with the built-in preamp, straight into whatever portable PA system or front of house, whatever. And all I had were my songs and my voice. And I'm finding more and more that that's what I keep coming back to is like, do I have the songs? Can I still sing them? Because this stuff now is like it's like a second nature to me. It's like it's once we find these things, your Zen Drive, or for me, whatever it is, the Benson preamp or the Collings guitar, it's like I know that this works, and someday I'm sure I'll find something else, But for now, it's it's just nice to have help to dial something like this in, because I can kind of just like get back to the music, and plus, and the gig I'm on, I'm not supposed to be making crazy shimmery noises anyway.
So why not? If you quickly play, I'll switch some of the sounds in and out. We'll let's hit that main preset,
and I'll be cool and have I told you a second ago I never have my tone knobs up to 10. Woo! The trem is set really slow, but I like it.
Just to do it one time, because it's so cool.
It's gonna be nice.
So it's cool on video, but hearing that my hairs are on end. You have such a tranquil and beautiful way of playing that is filled with momentous just amounts of intention, and when you play, it's watching a story be told, but you don't know what the story is, but you're creating it. I had a teacher when I was in grade 1, Andrew Carr, Mr. Carr, and he used to tell us at the end of every class, end of every week on Fridays, the story of Paolo and Vincenzo, and he didn't know what had happened, what was going to happen, so he made it up. And I remember there would be chapters each semester, and my favorite was they went to the ice and they unthawed this ice and then covered these words that led to a secret cavern that found, the treasure or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that reminded me of that. And you have a way of invoking a feeling when you play, as opposed to focusing on, oh, check out my sick sweep picking, my
Oh yeah,
nasty alternately.
I don't do any
You
of that.
play with you play with the joy of a child. And I want to talk about, what do you think it takes to achieve and do that? What keeps you alive, and how do you consistently play in a way that lets you do that? Because you don't go in with planned licks, you don't go in with planned forms. Are you finding you often fail and then achieve, or
Oh, there's
know?
definitely. I think there's definitely a certain element of that. One of the I don't even know if anybody ever told me this, but one of my favorite things to do is, if I ever make a mistake, I always do it twice. I've never made a mistake once. I always make it twice. If I play the wrong note, I do it again right afterwards. Sure, because sometimes it might deceive someone into thinking it was what I intended to do all along, but I would like to believe there was some reason I went there. And something else, I will say, there's my favorite guitar player of all time. I have so many favorites. We were talking about Adam Levy a second ago. He's an old buddy, and he's one of my favorite. We got to make a funny little record together many years ago called Neighbors, that we didn't practice. We just got together in a studio in Austin and with a drummer and made this record. But it's more of a songwriter record for him too. But Tony Shear is somebody who I used to play shows. I used to kind of open for him at this residency in New York many, many years ago when I was in college, at a place called the Living Room, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. But it was when it was on Ludlow Street on the Lower East Side. I would play Monday nights at 8. Tony would play at 9, and Jim Campolongo would play.
Oh, Jim.
Yeah, and Jim.
Monster.
My show was free. Tony's was free, and Jim's I think was $10. But like,
that's a monster.
What a crazy night!
But I haven't heard about Jim. Who is that?
Jim Campolongo? You mean
No.
Tony?
Oh, Tony. Sorry,
yeah.
Tony.
Yeah, Tony. See, not a lot of people know Tony as a guitar player, which is a shame. He's known in the jazz world as a bass player. He's played bass. You know, Bill Frisell has many different people over the years, but he has played bass with Bill Frisell on and off forever. And he's played with Nora Jones, and he's cut, I think, one of her tunes, or she's cut one of his tunes, and Adam also being in that world, of course. But Tony used to just play every Monday night with a bass player named Rob Jost and a drummer named Anton Fear. And I just started playing Monday nights because it was a night that I could do and a night that they would give me. And one of the nights my drummer was like, "Are you sticking around for the next show?" And I was like, "Well, I have class in the morning, whatever." And he was like, "You need to stick around." And Tony plays typically like a hollow body. I think he plays a Guild, not a Starfire, but something single cut. I don't know, some old Guild, and always Princeton's. And he had this like Cool Cat overdrive, the Dan Electro Cool Cat overdrive. I always own one. I have one in the house right now. The version 1. It was a Timmy clone that they got sued for, or cease and desist or whatever. Anyway, but Tony, there's a sort of I don't even know if I would call it a fearlessness to how he plays, but there's just this abandon to it that is so beautiful. He's so locked in. He plays slide. I could do slide on records if I have to, but I'm not. That's not really my world or aesthetic. But like, he just he's not afraid to be kind of ham-fisted. He's very lyrical in how he plays, and I think it all goes back to being a singer-songwriter first. Is that I'm always caring more about the arc of the song and the narrative of the song than I am about anything impressive that I can do. I don't ever think about being impressive when I'm playing guitar. And there are many, what roads I could have traveled, and there are plenty of times where I wish I was more studied at theory or practiced certain elements of guitar playing more. I'm not a jazz person. I don't, if you ever hear me playing something jazzy, it's because I've listened to people like Tony or Bill Frisell. But I think I'm always thinking about the narrative arc of it. And sometimes the narrative arc is messy, and sometimes the narrative arc is intense, and some of it is super quiet. And so I think I learned a lot about dynamics. Also, that was a trio. That's my favorite format to play in, typically, is me with a rhythm section. If I'm lucky enough to have my friend on keys, Jess Nolan, great. But I learned about filling space very intentionally and dynamically from watching Tony play. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of stuff. You can look him up on YouTube. There's a beautiful live record from those living room shows that was never officially released, but he's got a couple records out. But yeah, Tony Shear, I would say, is someone that I would say taught me without even if he didn't know it, you know, because we just played shows together and, you know, sat in with each other once in a while. But I think it's really, you know, you talk about this a lot too. I feel like it's not a, you know, it's not about me in that moment. It's about, like, even with when I'm playing my own music, I feel like I'm the more that I can allow myself to, like, actually be with the song versus like having an angle. There's no angle, and perhaps it's why maybe I could be more successful if I had an angle, but I don't have an angle when I'm playing guitar. All I really care about is connecting with the song, and as I sort of developed a style around that is, you know, decidedly less shreddy and a little more probably lyrical, maybe.
I think that's beautiful. I think there's a thing to be said. I discovered this through listening to Coltrane as a kid.
Yeah.
That there's just, you ever had that moment where you're almost watching yourself play, but you're in the song? I think you have a beautiful way of. Kenny Werner calls it the space. I think you access it in a, you know. Now show us your top 5 licks. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, here you go.
Kidding.
This is it. That's all I care about.
My whole career is one.
It's built off of that.
So I guess before we run off, then let's give a treat to the kind of, you know, we will do a, gosh, it'll be an hour or two, a full rig rundown studio thing. But this is your number one Collings. I've played this a handful of times and always been just enamored. Tell us, you have a beautiful relationship with the fellas at Collings that kind of have spilled into me starting to have one. So please tell us more about about this. What is this, and how did you get it? When did you get it? All that, everything we can possibly know.
I started playing Collings guitars in 2014, the year I moved to Austin, and it's because I met my friend Aaron Huff, who's the head of electric guitars there, and sort of I would argue a protege of Bill Collings, the founder of the company, master luthier, who unfortunately we lost some years back. But Aaron learned so much working for and alongside Bill all these years, and all those years rather. And Aaron and I met because I kept buying old weird guitar, like Japanese guitars from the 60s, and or like I started getting into luthier built stuff, but it would break and I would break it. And Aaron would be someone that my friend someone hooked me up with him as someone who might be able to help set up some of these guitars. And every time I would bring him yet another kind of junky instrument, he would tell me why it was junky and tell me that I should just let him help me find a Collings. And you know, and one day I went in there and I ended up I bought 2 from them in very quick succession. I was able to start working with them back then as an artist, and I've had many over the years, and unlike anything, like we just talked about, we switch in and out of stuff, but this one has always stayed. I've had it since 2018, I think, which is about when they came out with them. This is called the I-30 LC. This is basically their take on a Gibson 330. It's fully hollow. It has, I actually tested 3 different sets of pickups. Throwback had just started making P90s. This is their like medium output set. I actually really like the vintage output was too soft for me, and then I actually liked the high output ones, but they were not versatile enough. But these are the medium output P90s from Throwback, whatever they call them, and the one thing that they do, because a lot of their angle at Collings is like taking these beautiful vintage designs from stuff like this to, you know, obviously old Martins and Gibsons, or, you know, even the catalog guitars that Bill loved. My main acoustic guitar is a Waterloo, which is their take on like an old Kalamazoo. This one's a 12 fret. But they always want to take those beautiful designs, the things that Bill and all of them are inspired by and love, but just make them function for the modern player. And this guitar has special trestle bracing inside of it, which
what is that?
Trestle. It's a certain type of bracing system that just helps it prevent it from feeding back unintentionally. Like it's just a little bit more of a controlled feedback, and which to me, the thing that going back to again being a singer-songwriter, this guitar behaves very much like an acoustic guitar. Obviously, it's a much smaller body than an acoustic guitar, but it being fully hollow, it really just reacts it's kind of a little bit sensitive like an acoustic guitar can be. And I think it's a funny guitar to end up being my main one, because a lot of people, especially around here, obviously play something like a Tele or Strat or whatever. I feel like I can make some occasional Tele sounds out of this thing. I don't know about a Strat, but the pickups have a really kind of wide tonal scope, and I can. It's my favorite guitar to play for my music, because again, if I'm leading a trio, I can kind of like pick it like an acoustic guitar, thrash it like an electric guitar. And I just connected with it. I was looking at old 330s, not that I could like always afford them, but my buddy Aaron kept saying like, we're coming out with something, just wait. And I'm so glad I did. And it's also incredibly white, which I really appreciate. This one they aged for me. They had just started getting into it. It's probably a mess, but it's got some finish checking. It's subtle on the black finish, but you know, they have someone doing the tuners and whatever. It's probably finally ready for maybe some frets. I've played this guitar just incessantly for many years. I've dinged it. You know, these are very fancy guitars, but I have scratched the hell out of all of them. So I play this, and then I have as sort of a companion to it, I have their i35 LC, the vintage model, which is just their take on a 335. It's beautiful. I play a Jazz Mastery one from them. You know, it's kind of its own thing, but I have a baritone from them, a couple OMs. They make truly beautiful stuff. And again, once I started playing them, I just stopped thinking about it. So this is definitely the main one. I have a Colton case for it. I throw it under the airplane. I hope for the best, because I feel like I can play any gig on this guitar.
That's beautiful. I love that you've found an instrument as opposed to just a guitar, right?
Yeah.
I love that I got to see you today.
You too, man. Thanks so much for coming by and for setting up my stuff like I'm either a child or an old man. I can't decide, but I felt like an old man. When you were flying around with that thing, I was like, and it has a tuner, you know. But yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I'll come back and we'll do a full talk through all this. Is so much.
There's some fun, there's some fun stuff in here for guitar, believe it or not, with the old tape echoes and all that stuff.
The prime time.
Yes.
We'll make a video separately on that. I think is that your favorite rack delay? It's my favorite rack delay of all time.
It is. It's up there. It's that or the Chorus Echo, the RE301. I play that as an instrument.
I'm gonna quickly get a view on these.
I use the sound on that as basically like a very primitive, sampler looper, and that's also very special.
Echoplex.
EP3. Yeah.
EP3.
Echoplex. The prime time is incredible.
My favorite rack delay of all time. Yeah. PCM 42.
Yeah, PCM 42, PCM 80.
Oh, the David Torn.
Oh yeah,
he loves those. That's the Edge's favorite. Isn't it?
Yeah, this is the Edge. I'm a Lanois head, if you couldn't tell from the prime time, the Korg delay, or the mic in front of you, which is like his vocal mic of choice.
The Benson.
Yep.
You gotta have the Benson.
Yeah, the Benson. Although if you can't get the Benson rack thing, the plug-in is very good. Like Chris tricked me a couple times when I thought it was the real thing. So I would recommend the plug-in if you can't get the rack one. Rack one is awesome.
We'll come back and get deep into it.
Please.
I love you, man. Thank you.
You too, dude. Thanks, man.